The contractions ripped through Daphne's body like claws tearing her apart from the inside. She gripped the cold metal rails of the hospital bed, her knuckles bone white, her breath coming in ragged gasps that fogged in the frigid air of the room. The Moonstone Pack Hospital had never been warm, but tonight it felt like a tomb, sterile, gray, and utterly devoid of comfort. Below her window, she could hear them celebrating. Music drifted up through the floorboards, accompanied by the roar of approval from what sounded like the entire pack. Champagne glasses clinked. Laughter echoed through the building's ventilation system, each sound a blade sliding between her ribs. Daphne turned her head toward the frosted window, tears streaming down her face as another contraction seized her, and through the pain, she heard Marcus's voice amplified by speakers. "It is my honor to introduce you to your new Luna, Isabella Thorne." The crowd erupted. Howls of approval shattered the night sky. Daphne bit down on her lip hard enough to draw blood, copper flooding her mouth as she stifled a scream. Not of pain from the labor, though that was agony enough. This was deeper, more primal. The mate bond that had connected her to Marcus for 3 years was writhing in her chest like a dying animal, twisting and convulsing with each word he spoke to another woman. "You're crowning," the nurse said, her voice flat and professional. The middle-aged woman hadn't met Daphne's eyes once since admitting her 4 hours ago. Everyone in the pack knew. Everyone had known for weeks that Alpha Marcus was choosing Isabella, the daughter of a wealthy neighboring pack, over his pregnant mate. Daphne had just been too foolish, too hopeful, too desperately in love to believe it until now. Daphne gasped, another contraction cresting. "I need Marcus, please, the baby." "The Alpha is occupied," the nurse said, checking the monitors with mechanical efficiency. "Push now. 3, 2, 1. Daphne pushed, her wolf howling inside her mind, begging for their mate, for the father of their child. But the bond between them felt like rotting rope, fraying with each passing moment. She could feel Marcus's joy bleeding through what remained of their connection, joy that had nothing to do with her or the child she was bringing into the world. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and cold metal, nothing like the warm nest she'd imagined for her daughter's birth. She'd pictured candles and soft blankets, Marcus holding her hand, whispering words of encouragement and love. She'd been so naive. Time fractured into fragments of agony. Push, breathe, push again. Below, the party reached a crescendo. Through the mate bond, she felt Marcus kiss Isabella, felt his desire and satisfaction, felt him place his mark on another woman's neck, while Daphne's own mating mark burned like acid on her skin. Then suddenly, impossibly, there was a new sound. A baby's cry, thin and fierce, cut through everything else. "It's a girl," the nurse announced, and for just a moment, her professional mask slipped, revealing something like pity as she placed the tiny, blood-slicked infant on Daphne's chest. Daphne's world narrowed to the small weight against her heart. Her daughter, her Aria. The name came to her instantly, along with a surge of fierce protective love so powerful it momentarily drowned out even the mate bond's death throes. Aria's eyes, dark blue and unfocused, searched blindly, and her tiny hand grasped Daphne's finger with surprising strength. "Hello, little one," Daphne whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm your mama. I'm here. I'll always—" The door slammed open. Marcus strode in, his alpha presence filling the room like a physical force. He was devastating as always, tall and broad-shouldered, with chestnut hair and amber eyes that had once looked at Daphne like she was his entire world. Tonight, those eyes were cold, distant, already focused on something beyond this room. He still wore his formal suit from the ceremony. Daphne could smell Isabella's perfume clinging to him. "Marcus," Daphne breathed, hope flaring painfully in her chest despite everything. He'd come to see their daughter. Maybe— "I'll make this quick," Marcus said, his voice clipped and businesslike. He didn't look at the baby, didn't ask if Daphne was all right. I, Marcus Thorne, Alpha of the Moonstone Pack, reject you, Daphne Winters, as my mate and sever our bond. You and the child will leave pack territory within 72 hours. The words hit like silver bullets. Daphne felt the mate bond snap, not fray, not fade, but shatter with such violence that she screamed. It was as if someone had reached into her chest and ripped out something vital, leaving a gaping wound that bled darkness into her soul. Her wolf howled in agony, thrashing and keening, feeling the rejection down to their very bones. Arya started crying, sensing her mother's distress. "Marcus, please," Daphne sobbed, clutching her daughter tighter. "Please don't do this. She's yours. She's your daughter. I have no daughter." Marcus's face remained impassive, carved from stone. "Isabella is my mate now. My Luna. Any children she bears will be my heirs. You were a mistake, Daphne. A temporary bond that I've now corrected. Be grateful I'm giving you 3 days instead of demanding you leave tonight." He turned on his heel and walked out, leaving the door swinging open behind him. The nurse had disappeared at some point during the exchange. Daphne was alone with her newborn daughter in a freezing hospital room, something vital and irreplaceable torn from her chest, leaving only a hollow numbness spreading through her limbs like frostbite. She should cry more, she should rage or beg or fight. Instead, she felt nothing, empty, broken, discarded. Arya's cries pulled her back from the edge of that dark void. The baby needed her. Nothing else mattered. Daphne adjusted her daughter against her chest, letting the infant root and find her breast, the simple act of nursing grounding her back in her body, in this moment, in survival. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost meaning. The door creaked open again, and Daphne tensed, expecting another blow, but the figure who entered was hunched and ancient. An old woman in a healer's robes shuffled in, her face a map of wrinkles, her eyes milky with cataracts. She carried a bundle of dried herbs that filled the room with the scent of sage and moonflower. "You shouldn't be here," Daphne said dully. "I'm being exiled. I go where I'm needed, child." The old healer approached the bed, her movements slow but purposeful. She peered down at Arya with those clouded eyes, then placed a gnarled hand on Daphne's forehead. Her touch was surprisingly warm. The woman's fingers traced something against Daphne's temple, a pattern that felt ancient, deliberate. "Your daughter," she murmured, studying Arya's sleeping face. "She has her grandmother's eyes, the silver ones that see through lies." "What?" Daphne blinked, confused. Her mother had died when she was young, but she remembered those unusual pale eyes. "How did you—" "Some bloodlines run deeper than pack bonds." The healer pressed something into Daphne's palm, a small crystal pendant that glowed faintly with inner light. "This belonged to her. Keep it close. Trust what calls to you, not what drives you away." The old woman's clouded gaze sharpened for just a moment, focusing on something beyond Daphne's shoulder. "3 days," she whispered, almost to herself. "The moon will be dark, but not empty." Before Daphne could respond, the old woman shuffled out as silently as she'd arrived, leaving only the lingering scent of herbs and the crystal warming against Daphne's skin. Daphne stared at the pendant, then at her sleeping daughter's face, those tiny features that did remind her of old photographs she'd barely glimpsed. None of it mattered. She had 72 hours to figure out how to survive as a rejected mate with a newborn daughter and no pack, no home, no one. The numbness cracked just enough to let in a sliver of determination. She would survive. For Arya, whatever it took. The 3 days passed in a blur of pain and preparation. The severed mate bond had left Daphne weakened, feverish, her body trying to heal from both childbirth and rejection simultaneously. Her wolf was a wounded creature curled up in the back of her mind, whimpering and withdrawn. But Daphne forced herself to move, to pack the few belongings she'd been allowed to keep, to care for Arya even when exhaustion made her hands shake. No one helped. No one even looked at her. The pack she'd called family for 3 years treated her like a ghost, averting their eyes when she passed, conversations dying the moment she entered a room. Marcus had made his choice clear, and pack hierarchy was absolute. To show kindness to a rejected mate was to question the alpha's judgment. Daphne had never felt so invisible. On the dawn of the fourth day, she wrapped Arya in every blanket she could carry and began the walk to the pack border. Snow had fallen overnight, covering the forest paths in pristine white that crunched under her boots. Her breath misted in the frozen air. Arya slept against her chest in a makeshift sling, mercifully quiet and warm. Daphne had no plan beyond reaching the border. No destination. No contacts in other packs who might take in a rejected Omega and her bastard child. She just knew she had to keep moving, keep walking, because if she stopped, she'd collapse and never get up again. The winter forest was beautiful in its cruelty, ice-laden branches glittering like diamonds, morning light turning the snow into fields of stars. Daphne's boots left a solitary trail of footprints behind her, evidence of her erasure from Moonstone Pack's story. She should have been stronger, should have seen Marcus's betrayal coming, should have prepared better. The thoughts circled like vultures as she walked, mile after mile, until the trees began to thin, and she glimpsed the territorial markers ahead. Rough-hewn stone pillars marked the boundary, carved with Moonstone Pack's sigil. Beyond them lay neutral territory, which meant no protection, no laws, no safety. Freedom, she tried to tell herself. Freedom meant possibility. But her legs were trembling, her vision swimming. The mate bonds severing had taken more from her than she'd realized. She was running on pure will now, and even that was fading. Daphne stumbled, caught herself against a tree. Arya stirred and made a small sound of protest. "Just a little further, sweetheart," Daphne whispered, though she wasn't sure she believed it. "We just have to—" Her knees buckled. She went down hard, managing to twist at the last moment to protect Arya from the impact. Snow cushioned her fall, but also embraced her with its cold fingers, seeping through her clothes, inviting her to rest, to sleep, to let go. Just for a moment, she thought. Just close my eyes for a moment. Arya's cry cut through the seductive pull of hypothermia. Daphne forced her eyes open, forced her arms to cradle her daughter closer, sharing what little body heat she had left. But she couldn't make her legs work anymore, couldn't make herself stand. The crystal pendant the old healer had given her pressed cold against her chest, no longer glowing. False hope, empty promises. She'd failed. 3 days of freedom, and she was going to die in the snow at the border with her infant daughter, rejected and forgotten. "I'm sorry, Arya," she thought, darkness creeping into the edges of her vision. "I'm so sorry." Voices echoed in the distance, footsteps crunching through snow. Border guards, she realized dimly. They'd make sure she crossed fully out of pack territory before leaving her to her fate. Standard protocol. She didn't have the strength to be bitter about it. "Alpha King!" someone shouted, the title making her stir slightly. "There's someone here, a female with an infant. She's collapsed." "Alpha King?" The words filtered through Daphne's fading consciousness. Dmitri Volkov was here? The legendary Alpha King who ruled all territories, who only appeared once a decade for inspections? It couldn't be. More footsteps, these heavier, more purposeful. Then a presence, massive, ancient, powerful, swept over her like a tidal wave. Hands touched her shoulders, carefully turning her, and even through her coat, through her dying numbness, that touch sent electricity racing through her body. Daphne's eyes fluttered open. A face filled her vision, striking and severe, with sharp cheekbones and ice-blue eyes that held centuries of knowledge and power. Dark hair fell across his forehead as he leaned over her, and the moment their gazes locked, the world exploded into light. Golden fire erupted between them, visible even to her failing vision. The mate bond, not the pale shadow she'd shared with Marcus, but something primal and absolute, slammed into place with the force of destiny itself. It threaded through her chest, wrapped around her heart, filled the gaping wound where Marcus's rejection had left her hollow, and sang with a rightness that made her gasp. Mine, the Alpha King growled, the word reverberating with command and wonder. His eyes widened, shock breaking through his regal composure. You're mine. Daphne tried to speak, but the darkness was pulling her under again. She felt him lift her with impossible gentleness, felt Arya secured between them, heard his voice giving orders that sounded like thunder. She's my mate, he declared, and even through unconsciousness, Daphne felt the shockwave that pronouncement sent through everyone present. She is under my protection. Anyone who has harmed her will answer to me personally. The last thing Daphne registered before consciousness fled entirely was warmth. Blessed, overwhelming warmth, as the Alpha King's arms held her close, and the mate bond wrapped around her broken soul like armor. The true king shall claim what the false Alpha discarded. The old healer's prophecy echoed in her mind as darkness finally claimed her. But for the first time in 3 days, Daphne felt something that might have been hope. Consciousness returned slowly, in fragments. Warmth, softness, the scent of pine and rain, and something utterly male that made her wolf stir for the first time since the rejection. Daphne's eyes fluttered open to find herself in an enormous bed draped in midnight blue silk, a fireplace crackling across the room, and windows revealing a view of snow-covered mountains she didn't recognize. This wasn't Moonstone territory. This wasn't anywhere she'd ever been. Memory flooded back. The collapse, the Alpha King, the impossible bond that had snapped into place. Her hand flew to her chest, searching for the connection, and found it there. Golden and strong, thrumming with life and power, so different from the toxic thread that had bound her to Marcus. Arya, she gasped, sitting up too quickly. The room spun, but panic overrode dizziness. Where's my daughter? Safe, a deep voice assured her from the corner of the room. Daphne's head snapped toward the sound and her breath caught. The Alpha King sat in a leather chair near the fireplace, her daughter cradled expertly in his arms. Arya was awake and content, her tiny hand wrapped around his finger while he held a bottle at the perfect angle. The sight struck Daphne with such unexpected tenderness that tears sprang to her eyes. Dmitri Volkov, and it was definitely him, she recognized him now from the portraits and descriptions she'd heard, looked both utterly natural and completely surreal holding an infant. He was devastating in the firelight, his features carved from marble and shadow. But the way he gazed down at Arya held such careful gentleness that it made Daphne's chest ache. You've been unconscious for 8 hours, he said, his voice pitched low to avoid startling the baby. Those ice-blue eyes lifted to meet hers, and the mate bond surged between them, making her skin flush with heat. My physician examined you both. You were suffering from rejection syndrome, malnutrition, and exhaustion. Your daughter is perfectly healthy, though she was hungry. His jaw tightened. Tell me the name of the male who did this to you. The command in his voice was absolute. This was a king who expected immediate obedience. But there was something else underneath it. Fury, carefully leashed, like a predator deciding whether to strike. Marcus Thorne, Daphne whispered, unable to look away from his eyes. Alpha of Moonstone Pack. He rejected me during childbirth. 3 days ago. I was trying to leave the territory when... She swallowed hard. When you found me. Something dark and ancient flashed across Dimitri's expression. And the child? Arya. Her name is Arya. Daphne's hands twisted in the silk sheets. She's his daughter, biologically. But he doesn't claim her, doesn't want her. The words tasted like ash. He chose another woman as his Luna, someone more suitable. More suitable, Dmitri repeated, each word edged with frost. He had you, his true mate, the mother of his child, and he rejected you for political gain? I'm just an Omega, Daphne said, the old shame rising like bile. No family, no connections, no power. Isabella comes from wealth and influence. It was a practical choice. It was the choice of a fool. The absolute certainty in his voice made her look up again. Dmitri was watching her with an intensity that should have been frightening, but instead made the mate bond sing between them, warm and golden and impossibly right. You felt it, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. When I touched you. The bond. Daphne nodded slowly. How is that possible? I was mated to Marcus. Even with the rejection, I shouldn't be able to form another bond so quickly. It should take months, maybe years, because he was never your true mate. Dmitri shifted Arya to his shoulder with practiced ease, gently patting her back until she burped. The domestic gesture from the legendary Alpha King was so incongruous that Daphne almost laughed. What you had with him was a proximity bond, common, weak, easily broken. What exists between us is something else entirely. He stood then, moving with liquid grace despite Arya in his arms, and crossed to the bed. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. Tall enough that she had to crane her neck to maintain eye contact, built like a warrior despite the expensive clothes, radiating a power that made her wolf want to submit and challenge him simultaneously. I have waited 273 years for my true mate, Dmitri said, each word deliberate and weighted with meaning. I had begun to believe I would never find her. And then, I touched you, dying in the snow, and everything I am recognized, everything you are. He held her gaze, the mate bond pulsing between them like a living thing. You are mine, Daphne Winters, not by force, not by command, but by the will of the moon herself. And I am yours, if you'll have me. The offer hung in the air between them, impossible and terrifying, and everything she'd never dared to dream. Daphne stared at this ancient, powerful king holding her daughter with such care, offering her a bond that sang through her very soul, and felt the walls she'd built around her shattered heart begin to crack. I don't understand, she whispered. Why would you want me? I'm broken, used, rejected. I have nothing to offer a king. Dimitri's expression softened, and with his free hand, he reached out to cup her cheek with a gentleness that made her breath hitch. You are not broken, you are wounded, and there is a difference. Wounds heal. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. As for what you offer, you are my mate, my equal, the other half of my soul. That is everything. Arya chose that moment to make a small sound of contentment, and Dimitri's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. Besides, he added, looking down at the infant, anyone who could bring such a perfect creature into the world while enduring such cruelty is stronger than she knows. You walked 3 days through snow with a newborn to protect her. You survived rejection that would have killed a weaker wolf. You are exactly as you should be, Daphne. The moon makes no mistakes. Something in Daphne's chest, something that had felt dead since Marcus's rejection, flickered back to life. Not trust, not yet, but possibility, hope. She looked at her daughter, safe and content in the Alpha King's arms, then at the mate bond glowing golden between them, then finally at Dimitri's eyes, patient and certain and waiting for her answer. Maybe the old healer's prophecy wasn't madness after all. Maybe broken Lunas really could rise as queens. Okay, Daphne breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll stay. For now. Until I understand what this means. Dimitri's eyes blazed with satisfaction and something deeper, more possessive. That is all I ask, for now. He carefully transferred Arya back to her mother's arms, and the brief brush of his fingers against hers sent sparks racing up her arm. Rest, little mate. You're safe here, both of you. I swear it on my crown and my life. No one will ever harm you again. As he turned to leave, giving her privacy and space despite the bond demanding proximity, Daphne called out, "Dimitri?" He paused at the door, looking back with those ancient, knowing eyes. "Thank you," she said simply, "for finding us." His expression softened into something that might have been wonder. "No, Daphne. Thank you for surviving long enough to be found." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with Arya and a mate bond that promised everything she'd lost, and more than she'd ever imagined possible. Outside the windows, snow continued to fall on mountains she didn't recognize, in a palace that felt like a dream, with a destiny she couldn't yet comprehend, waiting just beyond the door. But for the first time since her labor began, Daphne felt something other than despair. She felt the possibility of home. The week following Daphne's arrival at the royal palace unfolded like a fever dream, beautiful, surreal, and too fragile to trust. Her suite in the private family wing was larger than the entire home she'd shared with Marcus. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that even in winter held a stark beauty, bare branches traced against snow like ink on parchment. The furniture was elegant without being ostentatious, all rich woods and soft fabrics in shades of cream and gold. A nursery had been connected to her bedroom overnight, filled with everything Arya could possibly need and dozens of things Daphne hadn't known existed. It was perfect, which was precisely why Daphne couldn't sleep. She stood at the window in the pre-dawn darkness, Arya asleep in her arms, and waited for the other shoe to drop. Men like Dimitri, powerful, ancient, commanding, didn't offer sanctuary without expecting something in return. The mate bond hummed between them constantly now, a golden thread she could feel even when he was elsewhere in the palace. But bonds could be manipulated, used. She'd learned that lesson with Marcus. "You're doing it again," a female voice said from the doorway, making Daphne turn sharply. Elena Volkov leaned against the doorframe, Dimitri's younger sister and closest advisor. She was striking in a way completely different from her brother. Where he was ice and shadow, Elena was fire and light, with auburn hair and warm brown eyes that missed nothing. She'd introduced herself the second day, bringing tea and casual conversation that had felt more like friendly interrogation. "Doing what?" Daphne asked, instinctively holding Arya closer. "Waiting for disaster." Elena entered the room with the easy confidence of someone who belonged everywhere she went. She wore training clothes, her hair pulled back, clearly having just come from the palace gym. "You stand at that window every morning before sunrise, looking like you're planning escape routes." Daphne's silence was answer enough. Elena's expression softened as she approached, keeping her movements slow and non-threatening. "He's not going to hurt you, you know. My brother. He's physically incapable of harming his true mate. The bond wouldn't allow it, even if he wanted to, which he doesn't. The bond." Daphne looked down at Arya's sleeping face, memorizing every detail as she did 100 times a day. Bonds can be rejected, broken, not true mate bonds. Elena perched on the arm of a nearby chair. "What you had before, that was a proximity bond, common, shallow, easily severed because it was never really meant to be. What exists between you and Dimitri is something else entirely. It's ancient magic, moon-blessed, and completely unbreakable once fully formed." "Once fully formed," Daphne repeated, catching the qualifier, "meaning it's not complete yet." Elena tilted her head, studying her with those two knowing eyes. "The final bonding requires mutual completion, intimate acceptance of the mate bond, which my brother is very carefully not pressuring you toward, despite the fact that an incomplete bond leaves you both vulnerable." Heat crept up Daphne's neck. She turned back to the window, watching the sky slowly lighten from black to deep purple. "I don't understand why he's being patient. He's a king. He could command." He could, Elena agreed. He won't. Do you know how many females have thrown themselves at my brother over the centuries? Thousands. Literally thousands. He's never touched a single one because they weren't you. She stood, moving to stand beside Daphne at the window. He's waited almost 300 years for his true mate. He'll wait as long as you need to heal and trust him. Even if it kills him, which, incidentally, the incomplete bond might actually do if you're separated or threatened. Daphne's head snapped toward her. What? The vulnerability I mentioned. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. Until the bond is complete, it can be exploited, attacked through magic, used as a conduit for dark spells. You're both exposed right now, but Dmitri considers your emotional well-being more important than his physical safety. She paused. That's the kind of male my brother is. The kind who would die before forcing his wounded mate into something she's not ready for. The words settled over Daphne like a weight. Before she could process them, Arya stirred and began to fuss, the small sounds escalating toward a full cry. Daphne shifted her, swaying gently, but the baby's complaints grew louder. She's hungry, Daphne murmured, moving toward the plush chair where she usually nursed. I should... The door opened again, and Dmitri entered carrying a breakfast tray. He'd clearly been awake for hours despite the early time, dressed in dark trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking every inch the warrior king despite the domestic gesture. His ice-blue eyes found Daphne immediately, the mate bond surging with his presence, and something in her chest eased without permission. I heard her waking, he said, his deep voice pitched low to avoid startling the baby further. I thought you might want food as well. He'd brought her breakfast. Every morning for a week, the Alpha King had personally delivered her first meal, using Arya's schedule as an excuse to check on them both. The gesture was so at odds with everything Daphne had experienced with Marcus, who had never once brought her food, never helped with anything domestic, never checked if she'd eaten, that it created a painful cognitive dissonance in her mind. Thank you, Daphne said softly, settling into the chair. She hesitated, then added, You don't have to keep doing this. I'm sure you have important things. Nothing is more important than this. Dmitri set the tray on the side table within her reach, then crouched beside the chair so he was at her eye level, rather than looming over her. The movement put him close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the pine and rain scent that was purely him. Then ensuring you and Arya have everything you need. Their eyes met, and the mate bond flared between them, golden and warm, and increasingly difficult to ignore. Daphne saw the longing in his gaze, carefully controlled but unmistakable, and felt an answering pull low in her stomach that terrified and thrilled her simultaneously. I should leave you to feed her, Dmitri said, though he didn't immediately move. His hand lifted as if to touch Arya's downy head, then hesitated. May I? The question, the fact that he asked rather than simply taking what he wanted, made Daphne's throat tighten. She nodded. Dimitri's fingers, so large and powerful, brushed against Arya's head with infinite gentleness. The baby immediately calmed at his touch, her fussing quieting to small, hiccuping sounds. A smile flickered across his severe features, transforming him into something almost boyish despite his ancient eyes. She knows you're hers, Elena observed from her position by the window, sounding amused. The bond recognizes pack and family. Arya's already claimed you as her father, even if you haven't claimed her yet officially. Dimitri's hand stilled, his gaze lifted to Daphne's, intense and searching. I would like to, he said quietly, claim her as my daughter, formally adopt her and give her my name and protection, if you would permit it. Daphne's breath caught. Marcus had rejected Arya, refused to even acknowledge her existence. And here was a king, a male with no biological connection to her daughter, asking permission to become her father. Why? The word escaped before she could stop it. Why would you want to take on someone else's child? Dimitri's expression turned fierce. Because she is yours. Because she is innocent and perfect and deserves a father who will cherish her rather than discard her. Because when I look at her, I see the future, my future, with you, and whatever other children we might be blessed with. His hand moved from Arya to cup Daphne's cheek, his touch making her skin sing. And because the male who rejected her is a fool who deserves to know that his daughter will be raised as a princess while he rots in obscurity. The possessive satisfaction in his voice sent a shiver through Daphne that had nothing to do with fear. Yes, she breathed, surprising herself. Yes, you can claim her. Dimitri's smile was devastating. He leaned forward, and for a heartbeat Daphne thought he might kiss her. But instead, he pressed his lips to her forehead, in a gesture so tender it made her eyes burn with unshed tears. "Thank you, little mate," he murmured against her skin. Then he stood in one fluid movement and turned to his sister. "Have the formal adoption papers prepared. I want them filed today." Elena grinned. "Already done, brother. I had them drawn up 3 days ago. I just needed Daphne's consent, which..." She pulled a document from seemingly nowhere. "I'll need you to sign." Daphne stared at the paper Elena offered, the official royal seal already affixed, blank spaces waiting for signatures. "You were that certain I'd agree?" "I was that certain my brother would be an idiot if he didn't ask," Elena corrected. "And whatever else Dimitri is, he's not an idiot." The moment felt surreal as Daphne signed the document that would make Arya a royal princess, protected by the most powerful wolf in existence. The pen scratched across paper, making it official, irrevocable. When she finished, Dimitri took the pen and signed as well, his signature bold and confident. "There," he said, satisfaction rich in his voice. "She's mine now, ours, and no one can question it." The possessive pronoun sent warmth through Daphne's chest even as anxiety twisted in her stomach. Everything was moving so fast. Too fast. She'd been in the palace for barely a week, and already her entire life had transformed. As if sensing her turmoil, Dimitri stepped back, giving her space. "I have council meetings this morning," he said. "But I'll return this afternoon, if that's acceptable. I thought perhaps we could walk in the gardens. The fresh air would be good for you both." It wasn't a command. It was an invitation, offered with the understanding that she could refuse. Daphne found herself nodding before she'd consciously decided. "Good." Dimitri's eyes warmed. "Until then, little mate." He left with Elena, their voices fading down the corridor, and Daphne was alone with Arya, and a signed adoption paper and a mate bond that grew stronger with every passing moment. She should be terrified. She should be planning escape routes, just as Elena had accused. Instead, for the first time in years, she felt the fragile beginning of something that might have been safety. The gardens in winter were a landscape of elegant desolation. Bare branches created intricate patterns against the pale sky, and patches of snow clung to the shadowed areas beneath evergreen hedges. Daphne walked beside Dimitri along a path that had been cleared of ice. Arya bundled against her chest in a warm sling that one of the palace staff had provided. The silence between them should have been awkward, but instead it felt almost comfortable. Dimitri matched his stride to hers, close enough that she could feel his presence, but not so close that she felt crowded. Palace guards followed at a discreet distance, more than usual, Daphne had noticed. Dimitri's beta Lucas had personally overseen the security arrangements. "You're troubled," Dimitri said finally, his breath misting in the cold air. It wasn't a question. Daphne kept her eyes on the path ahead. "I'm confused," she admitted. "All of this, the palace, the adoption, you, it feels like a dream. Like I'll wake up back in that hospital room and none of this will be real." "It's real." Dimitri's hand brushed against hers, sending sparks of connection through the mate bond. "I'm real. This is real. But why?" Daphne stopped walking, turning to face him. Arya slept peacefully between them, oblivious to her mother's turmoil. "You keep saying it's because we're mates, but that's not enough. The bond is just chemistry, biology. Why are you actually doing this? What do you want from me? Dmitri studied her for a long moment, those ancient eyes seeing far too much. Then he gestured to a nearby bench that had been cleared of snow. Sit with me. Let me tell you a story. Daphne hesitated, then complied. Dmitri sat beside her, close enough that their thighs almost touched, and stared out at the winter gardens as if seeing something else entirely. I was made Alpha King 273 years ago, he began, his voice taking on the quality of someone reciting history. Not born to it, made. The previous king had gone mad with power, had begun slaughtering entire packs for sport. Someone had to stop him. That someone was me. He flexed his hands and Daphne saw old scars crossing his knuckles. I killed him in single combat, and the crown passed to me by right of conquest. I was 97 years old, just a child by our kind standards. Daphne watched his profile, seeing the weight of centuries in the lines around his eyes. The crown came with responsibilities I'd never imagined, Dmitri continued. Territories to govern, laws to enforce, packs who would test me at every turn to see if I was strong enough to keep the throne. For the first century, I did little else but fight. Establish dominance, create order from chaos, build the infrastructure that allows our kind to coexist in the modern world. He paused. And the entire time, I was alone. Kings are meant to rule with their queens, true mates who balance and complete them. But I had no mate, no one who could stand beside me without fearing me, no one who saw me as anything other than a crown and a throne and power to be wielded. The loneliness in his voice made Daphne's chest ache. I searched, Dmitri said quietly. For 2 centuries, I searched for my true mate. Traveled to every pack, met thousands of females, hoped every time that the bond would snap into place. It never did. I began to believe it never would, that the moon goddess had somehow forgotten to create my other half. He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. And then I touched you, dying in the snow, and everything I'd been missing for 3 lifetimes suddenly existed. You are not chemistry or biology, Daphne. You are the answer to centuries of emptiness. You are home. Daphne felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know how to be that for you. I don't know how to be anyone's home. I couldn't even keep my first mate from— He was never your mate, Dmitri interrupted, his voice turning sharp. A true mate would have cherished you, protected you, worshipped the ground you walked on. Marcus Thorne is a coward and a fool, and when I think about what he did to you— His hands clenched into fists, and the air around them crackled with barely restrained power. Arya stirred at the sudden tension, making a small sound of distress. Immediately, Dimitri's rage vanished, replaced by concern. His hand moved to gently stroke the baby's back through the sling, the gesture automatic and tender. I'm sorry, he murmured. Whether to Arya or Daphne, it wasn't clear. I should control myself better. But the thought of anyone harming you makes me— He trailed off, shaking his head. Protective, Daphne finished softly. You're protective of us, beyond reason. Dimitri's lips quirked in a self-deprecating smile. I find myself wanting to destroy anyone who's ever caused you pain, which is problematic, considering I'm supposed to be a fair and just king. Despite everything, Daphne felt her own lips curve in response. It might cause some diplomatic issues if you start executing people for hurting my feelings. Then I'll find other ways to make them suffer, Dmitri said with perfect seriousness, though his eyes held a glint of dark humor. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the winter sky slowly shift from gray to pale blue. Daphne felt the mate bond humming between them, warm and constant, no longer quite so frightening. I can't promise I'll heal quickly, she finally said, or that I'll ever be the queen you deserve. I'm broken in ways I don't even fully understand yet. Dmitri turned to her, his hand lifting to cup her face with infinite gentleness. You are not broken, you are wounded, and I have all the time in the world to help you heal, if you'll let me. The sincerity in his voice, in his eyes, in the bond between them, made something crack in Daphne's carefully constructed walls. Before she could second-guess herself, she leaned into his touch, allowing herself to accept comfort for the first time in longer than she could remember. "Okay," she whispered. "Help me heal." Dimitri's smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. He started to respond, but froze suddenly, his entire body going rigid. His head snapped toward the eastern section of the gardens, his eyes flashing with wolf gold. "Dimitri!" Daphne's hand instinctively covered Arya. "What? Get down!" he roared, moving with supernatural speed to cover her body with his own. The arrow whistled through the space where Daphne's head had been a heartbeat before, its silver tip gleaming with an oily substance that could only be poison. It embedded itself in the bench's backrest with a solid thunk, missing them by inches. Chaos erupted. Palace guards converged from all directions, shouting orders. Dimitri kept himself positioned between Daphne and wherever the arrow had originated, his body a shield, the mate bond screaming with protective fury. "Stay down," he commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Lucas!" His beta appeared at their side immediately, weapon drawn. "My king! Get them inside! Now! Underground chambers, triple guard." Dimitri's eyes were fully gold now, his wolf rising to the surface. "I want whoever did this alive. I have questions." More arrows came, a coordinated attack, but the guards had formed a defensive wall. Dimitri moved with lethal grace, plucking an arrow from mid-air before it could strike a guard, his enhanced reflexes faster than human eyes could follow. But one arrow found its mark. Daphne watched in horror as the silver tip pierced Dimitri's shoulder, the poisoned barb sinking deep. He staggered but didn't fall, his hand coming up to grip the shaft. "No!" Daphne lunged toward him, but Lucas caught her, pulling her back even as she fought. "We have to get you to safety," the beta said urgently, already moving her toward the palace. "It's you they're after, Luna. The king can survive a poisoned arrow. You cannot." Daphne looked back as Lucas hurried her away. Dimitri had ripped the arrow from his shoulder and was tracking something in the trees with predatory focus, blood staining his white shirt. Their eyes met across the distance, and she felt his rage through the bond, not at being wounded, but at her being threatened. The guards were clearing the gardens, searching for the attackers. Daphne caught a flash of something in the shadows, a familiar scent carried on the wind that made her blood run cold. Marcus. She'd know his scent anywhere, even fouled by dark magic and malicious intent. Her ex-mate was here, had tried to kill her, or capture her. Or... The implications crashed over her as Lucas hustled her into the palace, down corridors that became progressively more secure, through doors that sealed with magical wards behind them. They ended in an underground chamber, clearly designed as a panic room, with reinforced walls and provisions for a siege. Beta Lucas positioned himself at the entrance, weapon ready, while Daphne collapsed into a chair, her entire body shaking. Arya had woken and was crying, sensing her mother's fear, and Daphne held her close, rocking frantically. "He's okay," Lucas said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "The Alpha King. I can feel him through the pack bonds. Angry as hell, but okay. The poison was meant for you. It won't work as well on him." "Marcus," Daphne whispered. It was Marcus. I smelled him. Lucas's expression darkened. "Your ex-mate. The one who rejected you. Why would he attack me now? He doesn't want me. He made that clear." Daphne's mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Unless... The door opened, and Dimitri strode in, his shoulder already bandaged though blood still seeped through the white gauze. He moved straight to Daphne, his hands framing her face, his eyes scanning her frantically. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "Did any arrows come close?" "No, I'm fine, but you..." Daphne's hands hovered over his wounded shoulder. You need a healer, the poison. Already purging from my system. Accelerated healing. He dismissed his injury as if it were nothing, his focus entirely on her. Daphne, we caught one of the attackers. He confirmed it was Marcus who hired him. But Marcus wasn't working alone. His jaw clenched. He's allied himself with Victor Constantine. The name hung in the air like a curse. Even Daphne, isolated as she'd been in Moonstone Pack, had heard whispers of Victor, the ancient vampire who controlled the Shadow Territories, who dealt in dark magic and had been Dimitri's enemy for centuries. Why, she asked. Why would Marcus ally with your enemy? He rejected me. Why come after me now? Dimitri's hands tightened on her face. Because you're not just my mate, Daphne. You're the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. He took a breath, his eyes searching hers. The Silver Wolf. Luna who will unite all packs under one banner. The healer who can purify corruption. The queen who will end centuries of shadow wars. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Victor wants to prevent that prophecy from coming true. And Marcus wants the power you'll awaken when our bond completes. They're working together to either control you or kill you. Daphne stared at him, unable to process the words. I'm just an Omega. I don't have any special powers. You do. Dimitri's voice was absolute. You just haven't awakened them yet. The old healer who visited you after Arya's birth, she saw it. That's why she gave you the crystal pendant. She recognized what you are. He paused. And now Marcus and Victor know too. Which means you're in more danger than I realized. The weight of it crashed over Daphne, not just Dimitri's mate, but some kind of prophesied queen with powers she didn't understand, and enemies who wanted her dead or enslaved. I can't, she whispered, panic rising. I'm not strong enough for this. I can't be what you need me to be. Yes, you can. Dimitri pulled her close, mindful of Arya between them, his forehead resting against hers. You already are. You survived Marcus's betrayal. You protected Arya through rejection and exile. You walked through snow to save her life. You are exactly strong enough, little mate. You just don't know it yet. Daphne closed her eyes, breathing in his scent, feeling the mate bond wrapped around them both like armor. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe she could be strong enough to face ancient enemies and fulfill prophecies, but all she felt was terrified. What do we do? She asked. Dimitri pulled back enough to look at her, his eyes fierce and protective. We complete our bond. Fully. That will awaken your powers and protect us both from dark magic. Then we find Marcus and Victor, and we end this threat permanently. His voice dropped to a growl. No one threatens my mate and lives to boast about it. The possessive promise should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel safer than she had in years. When? She whispered. When you're ready. Dimitri's hand cupped her cheek. Not before. I won't rush you, even for this. Daphne looked down at Arya, then back up at this ancient king who'd made himself her shield, who'd claimed her daughter as his own, who'd waited centuries for her and would wait longer still rather than push her before she was healed. The choice crystallized in her mind with sudden clarity. Tonight, she said. I'll be ready tonight. Dimitri's eyes widened, surprise flickering across his usually controlled features. Daphne, you don't have to. I know. She held his gaze, letting him see her determination. But I trust you. And I'm tired of being afraid. So tonight we complete the bond. We face this together. The smile that transformed Dimitri's face was beautiful and terrible. A king claiming his queen, a wolf recognizing his mate, a male seeing his entire future fall into place. Together, he agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss to her forehead that felt like a vow. As guards secured the underground chamber and made plans to move them to Dimitri's personal rooms once the palace was cleared, Daphne held her daughter close and prepared to step into a destiny she'd never imagined. The broken Luna would rise as queen. But first, she had to survive the night. The mate bond erupted with agony so sudden and visceral that Dimitri's wineglass shattered in his hand. He was in the council chamber reviewing territorial reports when it hit, Daphne's terror flooding through their connection like ice water in his veins. Not the general anxiety he'd grown accustomed to sensing from her over the past weeks, but raw, primal fear. The fear of prey caught in a predator's jaws. "Daphne," he breathed, already moving toward the door. Then came the second wave. Distance. The bond stretched thin and taut, pulling toward the northeast with physical force. She was being taken, away from the palace, away from him, away from safety. My king? Beta Lucas was on his feet, the other council members rising in confusion. Dimitri didn't answer. Couldn't answer. The rage building in his chest was something ancient and terrible, something he'd kept leashed for decades, because unleashing it would remind everyone what he truly was beneath the crown and civilized veneer. He was a killer, a conqueror, a force of nature that had ended the previous king's reign by tearing out his throat and bathing in his blood. And someone had just taken his mate. The transformation happened before he reached the corridor. His body erupted with power that cracked the marble floor beneath his feet, bones reshaping, muscles expanding, his human form giving way to something the kingdom hadn't witnessed in over a century. His wolf, but not the typical shifted form. This was his true Alpha King manifestation, the primal essence of his power given physical form. Black fur rippled across his massive frame, each hair seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Silver markings traced patterns along his shoulders and spine, ancient symbols that predated written language, the mark of kings chosen by the moon herself. He stood nearly 7 feet tall at the shoulder, larger than any natural wolf had a right to be, his eyes burning with molten gold that held centuries of accumulated power and present fury. The palace guards stumbled back as he charged past, their instincts screaming at them to submit, to bare their throats, to acknowledge the apex predator in their midst. Dimitri paid them no attention. His entire being was focused on the bond, on tracking that golden thread that connected him to Daphne across impossible distance. "Lucas!" The command came out as a growl that shook the walls. His beta shifted smoothly, a gray wolf half Dimitri's size racing to keep pace. "I'm with you, my king. Northeast, the Forbidden Mountains." Dimitri's voice in this form was layered with harmonics, multiple tones that spoke directly to the wolf in every shifter who heard it. "Victor has her. Gather the elite guard. We leave now. The mountains are 3 days' journey. We'll make it in one." Dimitri burst through the palace doors, his massive form launching into a run that ate up distance with supernatural speed. "I'll burn my own life force if necessary. I'm getting her back." Behind him, he heard Lucas howling orders, rallying the elite royal guards who'd been standing ready since the assassination attempt. Good. Dimitri would need soldiers for what was coming. But first, he needed to reach Daphne before Victor could hurt her, before the distance stretched the incomplete bond past breaking, before… Arya. The thought stopped him for half a stride. They'd taken Arya too, his daughter, because she was his now, officially and in every way that mattered. That tiny, perfect creature who'd wrapped her hand around his finger and claimed his heart without effort. The rage doubled, tripled, became something apocalyptic. Dimitri's howl split the night, a sound of such fury and anguish that wolves in packs 100 miles away would later report feeling it like a physical blow. It was a declaration and a promise. He was coming, and nothing would survive standing between him and his family. The journey to the Forbidden Mountains should have been impossible in less than 3 days, even for wolves. The terrain was deliberately treacherous. Victor had chosen his fortress location specifically to make it difficult to assault. Sheer cliffs, frozen rivers that could swallow an unwary traveler, avalanche-prone slopes that made large group movement suicidal. Dimitri didn't care. He ran through the night with his elite guard struggling to keep pace, his massive form moving with impossible grace over obstacles that should have slowed him. When a cliff face blocked the direct path, he climbed it, his claws finding purchase in ice and stone. When a frozen river proved too thin to cross safely, he broke through and swam, the glacial water unable to slow him for more than moments. Through it all, the mate bond guided him. He could feel Daphne's fear transmuting into something else. Determination, anger, a spark of power awakening. Pride surged through him despite his rage. His mate was fighting, his queen was refusing to break. "My king, we need to rest," Lucas panted as dawn broke over the second day of their forced march. The beta's gray fur was matted with ice and exhaustion, and behind him, even the elite guards were flagging. "Rest if you must," I continue. Dmitri didn't slow, his golden eyes fixed on the mountain peaks growing larger on the horizon. "You'll face Victor alone if you don't let us recover," Lucas argued, his tone carefully respectful despite his clear concern. "And you're burning through your reserves. I can feel it through the pack bonds. You're running on fury and willpower. Then fury and willpower will suffice." A howl echoed from the forest to their left, ancient and otherworldly. Dimitri's head snapped toward the sound, his hackles rising. Then another howl answered from the right, and another ahead. Within moments, they were surrounded by howls that didn't come from any living pack. The trees parted, and figures emerged that made even Dimitri's elite guards tense with unease. Wolves, but wrong somehow, their forms slightly translucent, their eyes glowing with silver light, their fur marked with the same ancient symbols that decorated Dimitri's own coat. They moved like smoke given shape, like legends made manifest. "The first guard," Lucas breathed, his voice awed and terrified. "The original protectors of the Alpha King line. They haven't been seen since the last silver wolf Luna walked among us," Dmitri finished. His rage cooled slightly, tempered by recognition and something like reverence. These spirits answered to only one authority, the prophesied queen. The largest of the spirit wolves approached, its massive head level with Dimitri's despite his enhanced size. When it spoke, its voice echoed as if from a great distance. "The Silver Queen calls, though she knows not what she is. The true king hunts for his mate. We are summoned by prophecy and bound by ancient oath. We will guide you to the Dark One's fortress and fight beside you when darkness falls." Dmitri inclined his head, the gesture carrying centuries of respect. "I accept your service with gratitude." The spirit wolf's eyes glimmered with what might have been amusement. "You would accept nothing, King of Wolves. You would storm the fortress alone and tear it stone from stone until you found her. We come not by your invitation, but by prophecy's demand. The Silver Queen rises. We serve as we have always served." With that cryptic pronouncement, the spirit wolves began to move, their translucent forms gliding over the terrain with impossible ease. They created a path through the treacherous mountains, showing Dmitri routes that hadn't existed moments before. Ancient ways that bypassed the worst obstacles, shortcuts that folded distance like paper. The journey that should have taken 3 days was completed in less than 2, though every moment felt like torture. Dmitri could feel Daphne through the bond, her emotions cycling between fear and fierce protectiveness, and something new, power awakening like sunrise after an endless night. She was changing, evolving, becoming what she'd always been meant to be. He just needed to reach her before Victor destroyed her for it. As the second night fell, Victor's fortress finally came into view. A dark structure of black stone built into the mountainside itself, surrounded by wards that made the air shimmer with malevolent magic. Lights flickered in narrow windows, and guards patrolled walls designed to repel any assault. Dmitri studied it from the tree line, his tactical mind cataloging defenses even as his wolf howled to charge immediately. Beside him, Lucas and the elite guard waited for orders, their breathing heavy from the brutal pace, but their eyes sharp and ready. The spirit wolves arranged themselves in a circle, their ancient presence making the very air feel thick with power. The wards are designed to repel living wolves, the leader of the first guard said. But we are not bound by such limitations. We will breach the outer defenses. You will follow in our wake. The Dark One's magic cannot hold against prophecy made manifest. What of Victor himself? Dmitri asked, his voice a rumble of controlled fury. And his forces? The vampire is ancient and powerful. He has prepared specifically to counter your strength. The spirit wolf's gaze was knowing. But he is not prepared for the Silver Queen's awakening. His arrogance will be his undoing. Through the bond, Dmitri felt a surge of power so brilliant it nearly staggered him. Silver light, pure and cleansing, washing away the taint of dark magic. Daphne's fear vanished, replaced by righteous fury and maternal ferocity. She'd awakened. His mate, his queen, had found her power. Now, Dmitri commanded, his howl splitting the night. We go now! The spirit wolves charged, their translucent forms streaming toward the fortress like arrows of moonlight. Where they touched Victor's wards, the dark magic shattered with sounds like breaking glass. Alarms began to wail, guards shouting in confusion as their supposedly impregnable defenses crumbled. Dmitri ran in their wake, his massive form eating up the distance, his elite guard flanking him. He felt no fatigue now, no exhaustion from the brutal journey. The mate bond sang with proximity and promise. Daphne was close. She was fighting. She was alive and powerful, and his. The fortress gates stood no chance against his fury. Dmitri hit them at full speed, and centuries-old iron buckled and tore like paper. Guards rushed to meet them, but they were ordinary wolves facing an alpha king in his true form, with the first guard at his side. The battle was brief and brutal. Dmitri didn't bother with finesse or strategy. He was a force of nature, tearing through Victor's forces with single-minded determination. Every moment spent fighting was a moment not reaching Daphne, and that was unacceptable. Blood painted the snow. Bodies fell. The fortress that had stood inviolate for centuries became a slaughterhouse as Dmitri carved his way toward the bond, toward his mate, toward everything that mattered. And through it all, he felt her power growing stronger, her presence burning bright like a star in the darkness. She was fighting too, his fierce queen, refusing to wait passively for rescue. Pride and love and desperate need surged through him. Hold on, little mate, he sent through the bond, praying she could hear him. I'm coming, just hold on. The silver light inside the fortress pulsed in response, and Dmitri knew, somehow impossibly, that she was answering him. Together, the light seemed to promise, we'll face this together. Dmitri burst through the inner doors, following the bond like a compass, and roared his challenge into the stone corridors. Victor would learn what it meant to threaten an Alpha King's mate. The world would learn what happened when the true king and Silver Queen united. And Marcus Thorne would learn that some betrayals carried consequences even rejection couldn't escape.